Greetings, my friends. In this video, I want to speak about one of the things that's been happening at the Vatican since the last time I spoke. Now, we know that Pope Francis has made a name for himself, particularly for his pastoral approach to caring for the people of God. So he really does have, in my mind, a wonderful, wonderful vision which moves the church in the 21st century. However, it's like trying to turn an iceberg around because there's so much resistance, both from clergy, cardinals and bishops, and yes, even a lot of priests who want to go back to the church before Vatican II. Anyway, that's not my topic today. In order to improve and protect children, Pope Francis established a commission. And you notice in the Vatican, they call them commission, not committee. Not sure what the difference is. Anyhow, and their mandate was to come up with recommendations that would further the protection of children and vulnerable adults regarding sexuality and abuse. So one woman he chose to put on this committee was an Irish woman by the name of Marie Collins. Now what's significant here is that Marie Collins herself experienced sexual abuse from clergy and had struggled with that all her life. But she was a good spokesperson who had a real good understanding of the horror of sexual abuse on a person's psyche. And so she was chosen to be a part of this pontifical commission for the protection of minors and vulnerable adults. Now, on March the 1st, Collins resigned from this commission. And she had said at the very beginning that if it violated her integrity, or if it didn't seem to be accomplished any good, she would simply resign, that she would not compromise her integrity. Well, on March the 1st this year, she did resign from the commission. And she gave some indication of why she felt that she'd had to resign in order to maintain her integrity as a person. And what she found out was the lack of cooperation and collaboration between the commission, and the bureaucrats at the Vatican. And what she realized was that when her committee came up with and articulated recommendations that would be used in an announcement to the bishops of the world, that some of the people in the curia, some of the men, simply stonewalled her. And the recommendations that they sent forward, they were simply shelved. So there was a lack of collaboration and cooperation with the curia, some members of the curia, and the committee for the doctrine of the faith. And it was for that reason that she did indeed resign from the commission, because of the resistance she found in the curia, resistance, and the ways they could take recommendations and simply put them aside, knowing that Pope Francis is an elderly man, he'll soon pass away, and someone else will come in, and they think all will be well. We can go back to the old ways of hiding material, hiding recommendations, hiding strategies that could really help to protect children. And so, with that in mind, Collins decided this duplicity is not for me. not for me. She often found that words that were spoken to the public about all the wonderful things they were doing, and yet behind closed doors, it was the very opposite. And so that duplicity as well really bothered her, and was a very much a big part of her decision to resign. She found that even though they were appointed by the Pope, and that the Pope did agree with their recommendations, it still didn't carry a weight. For example, one of the things they came up with was that anybody who had been a victim of sexual abuse, if they wrote into the Vatican, the least they could do was to respond to those people. Respond to them. And they refused to do so. They would refuse, just ignore them. And that's kind of one of the things that they really did upset her. And all the way, just the lack of cooperation, the lack of openness and transparency, sort of the let's keep things going the way they are. Why bother making any changes? And of course, the idea that eventually Pope Francis, there'll be somebody else, and as a new Pope, they will probably hope that he's more conservative, more traditional, and the good work of Francis will be stymied, just as the good work of Pope John, who called the Vatican Council II, just as he went through all of that with the bishops of the world. A lot of wonderful, wonderful new storytelling, new narratives. And once John died, of course, there were so many people in powers of authority, positions of authority, who then wanted to take the church backwards. And we see that even here. You can look around you and see where in parishes there's been regression of clergy imagining what it was like because they weren't around, their fantasy, and now nostalgia nervosa, we call it. Nostalgia nervosa. And that's what we call it. This nostalgia, they imagine what it might have been like, and now they are taking the parishes back to former times. And so there's that constant resistance to change, a constant resistance to the new. There is a traditional story, and there is the new story. The vast majority of clergy don't even know the emerging new story. So with that in mind, I would suggest that we understand a little bit more of why Marie Collins resigned from this commission. And it was to, in a sense, protest, I guess, but also to maintain her integrity, which she values very highly. And it kind of inspires all of us to live with our integrity, especially in the church life. That integrity on our part, and that we think for ourselves, and that we are able to take a stand for what we see as wrong, and also, which is equally or more important, take a stand for a movement forward into the future with a new model of church.